There's a silent cost to being well liked. Sounds strange, doesn't it? After all, isn't being liked what we all want? We work hard to be easy to talk to, right? We rehearse answers that sound smart but are non threatening. We wear the clothes that fit the occasion and say the words that sound thoughtful and ask questions that make others feel interesting. And it works. People people say you're kind and polite and thoughtful and supportive, and you get invited to things, and people confide in you, and you might even be praised for how safe you are and how easy you are to be around. But then something happens, and despite all the praise, the likes, the respect, something's missing though, and you're still not chosen, still not deeply known, still not the one that they pursue for or fight for or build with. And so you start to wonder, what is it that I'm doing wrong? Why does it feel like I'm doing everything right and still ending up feeling alone? The answer, I think, is both painful and liberating. You're not being rejected for who you are. You're being accepted for a version of you that's incomplete. Because the version of you that the world sees, the kind, the careful, the polished version, that might not be false, but it's not whole either. And if they've only ever met your performance, of course the connection doesn't last, right? Because no one can love the parts that they never meet. This is where the pretending may begin. And often it's subtle. See, pretending doesn't always look like lying. Sometimes it looks like silence, and you don't speak up when something hurts, and you say, "I'm good," when you're lonely. You may laugh at things that you don't really find funny, and you downplay your needs to avoid being too much. And before you know it, your entire relational life is being lived from the outside in. It's measured by how well you're being received instead of how well you're showing up in truth. And that's a tragedy because the thing that you most want, that is to be wanted and chosen and deeply connected, is impossible when you're hiding. And I say this with love. You can't be wanted for a version of yourself that you don't live in. You can be admired and you can be depended on, perhaps. You can be desired for a time. But unless you bring your real self to the table, your fears, your flaws, your longings, your truth, there is no intimacy. There's only applause. And applause fades. And here's the thing about pretending. It's exhausting. It drains you to perform emotional ease when really you're heartbroken. It flattens your spirit to nod along with things that you don't really believe in. It isolates you to be known only as helpful, but not as a human. And yet, and yet we do it. Not because we're fake, but it's because we never taught that it was safe to be real. We we learned early on, sometimes through trauma, and other times through culture, that love is conditional, and that if we're honest, we'll be rejected. That if we ask for more, we'll lose everything. And that if we stop performing, we'll stop being wanted. And so we built masks and personas and adaptations, and we became good students of what people liked, and better at hiding what we feared that they'd leave for. But over time, those masks became prisons. And the worst part is that we start to believe the lie ourselves, that the real us, the unfiltered, unedited version is unworthy, and it's unlovable, and it's too needy and too emotional and too strange, just too much. And so we keep pretending, and we call it maturity, and we call it low maintenance. We call it not rocking the boat, right? But what we're really doing is we are disappearing, one unsaid truth at a time, one buried boundary at a time, one suppressed desire at a time. And the cost of all this is we go home feeling like we're liked, but we're never loved. We're appreciated, but we're never chosen. And we're visible, but never actually seen. So how do we stop? How do we move from pretending to being present? From being liked for our mask to being loved for our truth? It starts with this. You have to believe that the unedited version of you is worthy of love. Not because it's perfect, but because it's real. And realness is the only foundation that connection can stand on. I mean, think about it. Every relationship you've ever had was built not just on what you gave, but on also what you revealed. And that was your fears, your hopes, your weird quirks, your grief, and your questions. See, that's where trust comes from. That's where intimacy begins. It's not in perfection, but in presence. And the moment that you stop pretending, something powerful begins to happen. And some people will pull away, but the right people are going to lean in with interest and intentionality. They'll feel your honesty, they'll sense your integrity, they'll recognize your depth, because now you're not broadcasting a brand, you're inviting a bond. And bonds last much longer than branding. But let's pause on this idea of being liked versus being wanted. Because being liked is about presentation, right? Being wanted, though, is about presence. And while the world rewards the former with quick attention and compliments and access, only the latter one leads to true connection. And here's the twist. You can be widely liked and still feel deeply lonely. Because the version that people like may not be the real you. It might be the one who's easygoing, or the one who always smiles. It might be the one who never needs too much, or the one who seems fine even when they are breaking on the inside. And you can be invited to every gathering and messaged for every favor and leaned on in every crisis, and still go home feeling invisible. Because what people are connecting to is your role. And roles, no matter how useful or admirable, are not relationships. Real relationships don't form around who you perform as. They instead form around who you are when the performance ends. And that means your fear, your depth, your rawness, your humanity, all of these things. That means letting someone see behind the curtain. And that's a terrifying prospect, especially if you've spent years being praised for performance. If your identity is wrapped up in being the good guy or the strong one or the low maintenance friend, well, you start wondering, if I stop being what they want, will anyone still be here? And that's a haunting question for so many people, because of it, we keep playing roles that no longer fit, and we keep pretending that we're okay, and we keep saying yes when we really mean no, and we keep staying silent when something hurts, and we keep apologizing for needing anything at all. But that silence eats away at us, and you can't build intimacy while you're hiding. You can't feel chosen while you are filtered. You can't be loved while pretending not to need it. Because eventually, it breaks. You either collapse under the weight of being the nice one, or you explode in confusion and frustration, saying, I did everything right. Why wasn't I enough, right? And doing everything right isn't the same as doing everything real. Sometimes the most right thing you can do is to finally tell the truth about how lonely you are, about how tired you are of pretending, about how much you want to stop negotiating your value. The truth, the truth is risky, but pretending, that's exhausting. And people can feel the difference, even if they don't know how to name it. They feel when you're polished but absent. They'll feel when you're kind but not open. And they'll feel when something is being held back, even if they can't say what it is. And that dissonance keeps them from trusting and from leaning in and from choosing you fully. So here's a new invitation to consider. Don't just be available, be visible. Not just visible emotionally or emotionally available, saying I'll listen to you, but being present emotionally, as in I'm bringing all of me into this moment. Your pain, your humor, your opinions, your awkwardness, your sense of wonder, your voice, because that's the version of you that's worth knowing. That's the version that builds safety, not by being perfect, but by being human. And yes, that might mean that you lose some people. People who liked your silence more than your truth, or people who liked how useful you were more than how honest you could be. And that's not loss, that's clarity. Because the ones who stay after the pretending stops, they're the ones that you can finally rest with. The rest is really the opposite of pretending. Rest is like showing up without that inner dialogue of, am I being too much, right? Or did that sound weird? Or will they still like me if I say this? Rest is breathing deeply in the presence of someone who's not looking for a version of you, but who's looking instead for you, unfiltered. And you deserve that. But you can't receive it until you stop managing impressions and start showing your insides. This does not mean telling your whole life story to everyone you meet. This doesn't mean throwing out the boundaries that you have. This does not mean being raw all the time. It just means matching your outside with your inside values. It means saying what you actually mean. It means asking for what you need and letting yourself be seen, not for approval, but for connection. Because approval is a performance metric, right? Whereas connection is it's a presence response of sorts. And what your heart is really craving isn't the applause, it's the attunement, the feeling of someone tracking with you and staying present, noticing your shifts, caring about what you feel and not just what you do. That kind of connection doesn't come through pretending. It comes instead through showing up again and again as the messy and beautiful full version of you. And it might feel awkward at first. You might say too much, maybe. You might fumble over your words, right? You might get blank stares perhaps. But keep showing up. Keep showing up, because one day someone will look at you, not your mask, and they'll say, I see you. I get you. I want to be with you. And when that day comes, you'll know that you were never too much. You were just waiting to be known for real. So what does this look like in real life? Let me strip away the theory and get practical. Let me talk about the small everyday choices that reveal whether you're living as your real self or the rehearsal self? It starts in conversations. Do you tell the truth, even when it's messy? Or do you smooth over the edges of your opinions just to keep things comfortable? When someone asks how you're doing, do you give the default, I'm good, even when you're struggling? Or do you take a breath and say, honestly, today was a rough one? Those are not grand and dramatic reveals, are they? They're small moments of alignment. But over time, these moments will create a pattern. And they tell people around you, this is a space where I'll be real. Not performative, not filtered, but I'll just be me. And when you start living this way, the world begins to respond differently. Some people will recoil, and it's not because you're wrong, but it's because your truth challenges the illusion that they're trying to maintain in their own lives. Others, they'll breathe a little easier. They'll meet you in your honesty. They'll drop their own masks because your courage gives them permission. That's how safe spaces are built. Not through politeness, but through presence. So let's say you're in a romantic dynamic. You really like someone, let's say. You find yourself wanting to be chosen, to be impressive, to make all the right moves. In that moment, the temptation is to dial yourself down, to only share the parts of you that feel smooth or digestible or attractive. But here's the shift. Instead of asking, how do I keep their attention? Ask instead, how do I stay connected to myself? That one question changes everything. Because when you're connected to yourself, you stop molding and you start offering. You stop measuring your value based on their response, and you instead start standing in your value regardless of what they see. And ironically, that is the thing that makes you magnetic. Not because you're performing perfectly, but because you're holding your center in a world where most people are still shape-shifting just to be liked. I mean, think about it. Well, the last person that you felt truly safe with, it wasn't the person who had all the right answers or who always agreed with you, was it? Wasn't it someone who showed up honestly? Maybe they said something vulnerable. Maybe they admitted that they were nervous, right? Perhaps they asked a question that they did not know how to phrase well. Maybe they let you see the real them without flinching. That's what connection feeds on, unfiltered presence. Not because it's flashy, but because it's real. Here's another example. Let's say you're in a group of friends and someone says something that subtly hurts you. Maybe it was a joke at your expense or a brush off, a moment of dismissal. The performance version of you would probably smile and let it go. It would tell you, don't be dramatic, it's not a big deal. But the real you, he pauses. He notices the pain. He says, maybe later or maybe right now, he'll say, hey, when you said that, it stung a bit. And then suddenly something shifts and you've broken the pattern. You've stopped protecting people from your truth and you've started protecting your relationship with yourself as a primary starting point, because that's the cost of pretending that we rarely talk about. It's that you lose trust with yourself when you pretend. You stop believing your own emotions and you override your gut feeling and you train yourself to believe that being lovable requires being less. And it doesn't. Your truth is not a threat. It's a threshold. And yes, it will shake things up. You will be misunderstood sometimes. You might lose people who only liked the you that played a role, and they may not appreciate your reality, but you'll gain something far greater in this process. You'll gain your peace, peace that comes no longer from negotiating your worth, Peace that comes from not running a mental script every time you speak. Peace that comes from knowing the people who stay are there because they really see you. And isn't that what we all want most? To be loved without armor, to be held without scripting it first, to be wanted not for our usefulness, but for our aliveness. The truth is, you're already enough. Not once you get more polished, and not once you become more chill, definitely not once you've mastered every social cue. Your worth is intact now, in this moment, with your mess, with your depth, with your awkward pauses, with your too honest questions, with your stories that meander. You don't have to be more impressive. You just have to be more present. And you don't have to be perfect to be wanted. You just have to be yourself, to be real. So how do you begin? How do you start showing up without layers that you've been carrying for years? The answer is not flashy. It's not a dramatic makeover or an emotional grand reveal. It's through slowness. It's through practice. It begins with a single moment of honesty, a quiet moment of honesty. Maybe it's texting someone back without overthinking the perfect wording, right? Maybe it's pausing in conversation and saying, actually, I'm not okay today. Perhaps it's catching yourself mid performance and gently asking, what am I afraid that they'll see? And then choosing to let them see it anyway. Not because you don't care how they respond, but instead because you've stopped betraying yourself in exchange for approval. That's where real connection is born. Not in pretending to be perfect, but in choosing to be honest when it matters the most. It means that you stop smiling through discomfort. You stop nodding when you disagree. And you stop laughing when you really want to cry, because it means like you're stopping shrinking when you want to be held. And you don't have to be emotionally naked with everyone, right? But you do have to stop living like your truth is a threat. Because if you keep hiding, here's what's going to happen. When you keep hiding, you'll keep attracting relationships that mirror your performance, but not your persona or your real identity. You'll feel unseen even when you're surrounded by people. You'll be praised for calmness while you're drowning in your silence. And you'll wonder why intimacy always seems one layer out of reach. And you'll question maybe if love is not for people like you. But as you know, that's not true. Love is for people who are willing to be known. And being known starts with this radical act, and that is stop pretending and start participating. Participate in your relationships. Speak into them and move through them with honesty, and invite people to meet the real version of you, not the idealized draft version. And when people walk away, let them, make space for them too. Not because you're unlovable, but because you weren't ready for accepting them if they only settled for the curated version of you. Every time you choose honesty over performance, you're creating space for the kind of love that doesn't ask you to shrink. And yes, it's a risk. But the bigger the risk is living your whole life inside of a role, waiting for someone to guess what you really need. You deserve way more than that. You deserve a connection that starts with, this is who I am. Not just, this is what I have to offer. Not just, this is how I want to make you feel. But this is me. This is all of me. That I am still here. I am showing up. And that's the beginning of intimacy. And it changes everything. Because once you taste what it's like to be fully wanted without filtering, you'll never go back. You'll never again apologize for having depth. You'll never again trade your truth for anyone else's approval. You'll never again perform safety just so that you can be tolerated. Instead, you're going to build relationships that make room for your fullness, where your needs don't scare people away, where your emotions they don't feel like liabilities, and where your presence isn't just appreciated, but it's actually chosen. And the people who meet you there, they won't ask you to be smaller. They won't need you to perform. They won't offer love with a checklist attached to it. They'll want you, not your mask. They'll see you and not your silence. And they're going to love you, not the role that you're playing. And that, my friend, is where everything begins to heal. So take the risk. Be known. Let go of the version of you that kept you safe, but lonely. And let the world meet the version of you that's been waiting to breathe. Because that version, he's not too much. He's not unworthy. He's not hard to love. He's just you. And that's exactly where connection starts, with you.